Welcome everyone to day 8 of the Democrat shutdown. As is our custom now, we'll come out every morning and give you an update on where things stand. I've tried to make this as simple as possible and as digestible as possible. It seems complicated, what's happening in Washington right now. It actually is very simple. Don't let the Democrats distract you and try to convince you of things that are not true. Yesterday, or a couple of days ago, Monday, I laid out 6 simple truths about how the Democrats shut down the government, why they did it, and why it is so important for them to come to their senses and turn the lights on. Yesterday, I went through 5 fast facts for you about the shutdown, and I explained, as everyone now knows, Chuck Schumer's desperate attempts to rehabilitate his own image by shutting down the government. Today, we're going to talk about some of the consequences of that shutdown and what it means to real people around this country, real Americans experiencing the devastating cost of their political antics here. And I'm going to read you some sample quotes and headlines that we just collected yesterday from around the country. Here's a headline from The Hill. GOP leaders point to Capitol Police missed paychecks as shutdown drags on. So today, the U.S. Capitol Police officers are going to come to work to bravely protect U.S. government officials and staff in these dangerous times. They're going to do that without pay. Many Democrats in this chamber, by the way, I want to note, are going to receive paychecks this month while the men and women of the U.S. Capitol Police who are protecting them will not. Here's another headline from the New York Post. Aviation groups warn a government shutdown will delay aircraft safety inspections, maintenance work on critical equipment. While air traffic controllers are going to continue to serve in their posts, thankfully, critical safety inspections are going to stop, increasing risk for air travelers. That affects everybody. Here's another headline from Georgia, local media in Georgia. Central Georgia food banks prepare for surge of new clients during the government shutdown. It's a sad headline. Remember, Georgia's 2 Democrat senators, Warnock and Ossoff, have now voted 5 times to keep the government closed down. 5 times so far. I suspect they may continue, and they're hurting real people in the state of Georgia. Here's one from New Hampshire local media. National parks caught in the crosshairs of government shutdown. Let me point out that both senators from New Hampshire, Senators Shaheen and Hassan, have repeatedly voted to keep the government closed, and New Hampshire's national park sites closed by extension. How about New Jersey? Here's a headline yesterday. Hospital at-home telehealth programs on hold amid government shutdown. You got 2 Democrat senators in New Jersey, Andy Kim and Cory Booker, and they have repeatedly voted against funding these programs, which New Jerseyans rely upon daily. Here's one from Michigan. Michigan nonprofit leaders said a shutdown would be at best disruptive and at worst potentially devastating for local communities. There are 2 Democrat senators in Michigan, Gary Peters and Alyssa Slotkin, and they have voted now 5 times to enable this devastation upon their communities. One more, I could do this all day. Here's one more from CBS News. Government shutdown fears have Colorado food banks bracing for potential new visitors. You guessed it. 2 Democrat senators from Colorado, Michael Bennet and John Hickenlooper, they keep voting over and over to keep the government closed. Democrats claim they want to negotiate, but that is already happening in a bipartisan, bicameral fashion. And we brought in the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee this morning, Tom Cole, who can talk more about that. But I just want to say this as I yield to Mr. Cole, and then you'll hear from the rest of the leaders, and I'll take some questions. There is one sad and inescapable fact that no one can forget here. This shutdown is nothing more than political cover for Chuck Schumer and the Democrats. They are worried about the Marxist flank in their Democrat Party. The Marxists are about to elect a mayor in New York City. That's Chuck Schumer's state, and he's terrified that he's going to get a challenge from his far left. I've noted that Chuck Schumer is a very far left politician, but he's not far enough left for the communists, and they're coming for him. And so he has to put up his dukes and show a fight. So they picked a fight on something that's not even related at all to the shutdown and the funding that we should have gotten done by the end of September. We just need a stopgap measure to give us a little more time to get the job of Congress done. They refuse to do it because they're playing politics, and real Americans are paying the price for it. But let me introduce Chairman Cole, and he can tell you about some of these discussions that have been going on. Mr. Cole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Usually when I follow the Speaker, I usually think I should just say what he said and excuse myself right away. But in this case, it is pretty easy. I mean, we've had a pretty decent year in the House Appropriations Committee, all 12 bills out of committee before September 30th. 3 that we are in negotiations on with the Democrats. Those negotiations have gone very well. We're prepared pretty quickly to close once the government's reopened. We could get at least 3 bills done. The President could sign them in. Those things would be immune from a shutdown until the following September 30th. Then we'd pick another group of 3 or 4 bills that we would do in cooperation with our Democratic colleagues and start working on that. So the process, honestly, was moving along pretty well. And then we had unrelated demands, obviously related to repealing work the Congress had already done on Medicaid, and then these new discussions on subsidies. And I do want to point out, at least the bill we have right now in front of us doesn't even go till December 31st. I mean, these actions would still, we could do this work and still have time to turn around, as the President and our leadership has pointed out in both chambers, and sit down and talk about these other issues. But it's hard to do much when the negotiations aren't happening simply because the government is shut down. So again, we're prepared to work. I've got very talented counterparts on the Democratic side. They're good negotiators. We've negotiated a lot of labor issue bills together between Patty Murray, Rosa DeLauro, and myself, and obviously Susan Collins is one of the best legislators in the building. So it's not like we were going to have a hard time, I think, finding common ground, but you do have to restore the government for that to happen. Democrats are not likely to move bills while they've got the government shut down, because it suggests that absent that, we would be moving through the process as normal, and frankly, in a much better shape than we've been in recent years. So again, I'm just hopeful that my colleagues in the Senate, and it's worth pointing out, a majority of the Senate's already on our side, a bipartisan majority of 55. So this really does get down to Leader Schumer and the bulk of his caucus just simply shutting down the government over items unrelated to what we normally do in appropriations. I've mentioned this to both the Speaker and the Leader because they make these decisions, but you know, we should not be handling Medicaid on my committee. We should not be handling the Obamacare subsidies simply because we don't have the expertise or the jurisdiction to do either one of those things. What we can do is move the bills through the process, make sure that every soldier is paid, make sure that every air traffic controller is paid, make sure that the American people don't lose any services. So we're prepared to do that. Frankly, I think my Democratic colleagues are prepared to do that once we resolve this shutdown, and that's quite simply in the hands of Leader Schumer and the bulk of his caucus. When they make the mind that they want the government up and running, believe me, we'll move very quickly, and we'll try to move away quickly from a CR status to passing bills individually or in small groups, and get folks up and working again, and get the government restored and continue that process as we're supposed to do. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I just yield back.
Well, appreciate the work that Chairman Cole and the Appropriations Committee have done months and months ago to get us in a place where we would be ready to have all of the appropriations in a place where you can negotiate those differences. It was Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries who chose to take their toys and go home, all to appease the most radical elements of the far left, because Chuck Schumer is more concerned about his political job than he is about the jobs of millions of American families. American families' lives are at stake here. Whether or not we're going to be able to pay our troops, whether or not people can get on an airplane and go visit a relative or take a vacation, whatever their plans may have been, are being disrupted. Real lives of real people are being disrupted so that Chuck Schumer can show the far left Marxists in his party that he's having some kind of tantrum and fighting Donald Trump because he's afraid of the far left part of his political base. A lot of people say, what is this really about? And obviously you see Democrats trying to make it about things that have nothing to do with the basic funding of government, the bill that we passed here in this House just a few weeks ago. And in fact, a lot of Democrats are having buyer's remorse, but every one of us has a voting card. And weeks ago, Republicans and Democrats in the House had an opportunity to put this voting card in the machine and tell the American people where they stand on a government shutdown. And 99% of House Republicans voted yes to keep the government open while we negotiate our differences, and 99% of Democrats voted no to shut the government down. Some of them are having buyer's remorse, and I don't blame them. They're now realizing the dire consequences that their no vote caused to real families across America. Some of them are begging the Speaker, please bring us back in so they can get another shot at this. But you don't get a do-over. They picked the wrong side. They voted to shut the government down. They failed the test. But the good news is they can get bailed out by the Senate. If they really want to solve these problems, if they really want to make sure our troops